who you thought you were. I was 57 when I learned it, and it was like the way I described it was untethered from reality. I mean, I just questioned every moment of my life up until that point.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 139. I just purchased my ticket for the Untangling Our Roots Summit, which will be held in Louisville on March 30th, 2023. It is a conference that will go on for about 2 to 3 days, and I will be there presenting with other podcasters in the NPE and adoptee community. And also, this is a summit for donor-conceived individuals as well. And I will also be part of a few different meet and greets if you want to come and meet some of your podcasters and actually see people in person. I'm hoping many of my previous guests will be at the summit so I can see their face. And I know some of the guests that have been on this podcast will be presenting there as well, including Corey Goodrich and Richard Wentz, and I can't remember who else. Eve Sturgis will be there from Everything's Relative. Alexis from DNA Surprises. There will be probably 30, 40, 50 of us, speakers, authors, podcasters, that will be there. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I already have my ticket. Feel free to go to the Untangling Our Roots website and get your pass as well. Right now they have an early bird discount if you're interested. And today I am speaking with an NPE. He will be sharing his story, and I am speaking to Geoff. Hi, Geoff.
Hello, Lily. So good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. You have been very patient. I think you first started writing me back in 2021. So I'm sorry for the long wait, and I'm so glad to hear from you today.
Same here. I think it is worth the wait. And I just want to say thank you for creating this podcast. And it's a wonderful tool for all of us NPEs and NPE-related folks to help through their journey as we all try to sort through this kind of information and how to continue on with your life after you learn these things.
Right? That's what we're trying to do, is just continue on with our life and our healing. And so we are going to hear your story today. So I would like you to start with your family of origin. Give us a little background about yourself, and we will take it from there.
Thanks. So I've written this down, but then I put that away. I just have a few notes. My family of origin begins with who I thought was my mom and my dad. Got married in 1959. They were both from the outskirts of Boston. They're both Irish Catholic people that unusually they were both only children. I wasn't born until 1963, and they had both moved to Maine in New England and taken jobs. My dad at Bowdoin College, and my mom was a nurse at a place called the Pineland Training Center, which will figure more heavily in my story later on. I was joined by my sister in 1966. We lived there until about, I believe, 1968, 67, 68 timeframe, where we moved for a short time down to Kentucky I was quite young, 4. My sister was less than a year old. We didn't live there very long before we returned to Bangor, Maine, where lived there from like 1968-ish until 1972, when my parents got divorced. So I did like first, second, third grade there. My mom was in the state legislature for a short time while also working as a nurse. And my dad had been into teaching, but then got more involved in working with the Native Americans there in Maine at that time. Were going through some significant changes where they had a little more self-determination and that sort of thing. And he helped run their social services programs on their reservations there. But as I said, my parents, if I just give a little more color to when we lived in Pownell, I remember a lot of parties that my dad sort of organized because he was on the faculty at Bowdoin College. So I remember a lot of college students and pretty happy times. There's a lot of singing and music, and turned out a fair amount of drinking, which I didn't realize at the time was probably more than was healthy, but it all seemed like fun. My parents also raised whippets and showed them. So I remember traveling around with my mom to different dog shows and that sort of thing. Then in Bangor, there was less of the music and fun times, a little more fighting and arguing. And like I said, they got divorced in 1972. My mom, while she was in the state legislature, tried to change or present a law to address a woman's right to choose. And that was quite controversial. It was like before the Roe versus Wade had taken place. So I do remember some friction with the administration. I used to do an after-school program at the YMCA. They didn't seem, once they realized who my mom was, there were some issues there. And then apparently, I wasn't told about it till later, there were some death threats and that sort of thing. So I do, though, remember being brought to and from school with police cars following us and things like that. My parents got divorced in 1972, somewhat amicably, but later, I kind of wondered about why. My sister and I went to live with my dad after the divorce. We stayed in the house in Bangor, Maine for a while, and then we moved to Somersworth, New Hampshire. And my mom moved permanently to Augusta, Maine. We'd visit her periodically. While in New Hampshire, my dad met my future stepmom, and then she had family roots in Vermont. We wound up moving to Vermont, and I lived in Vermont from 1974 to 1980. And my mom stayed in Augusta, and like I said, Maine, and we'd go there once or twice a month, and sometimes for a few weeks at a time, sometimes just the weekend. But my mom remarried as well.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't normally interrupt, but I just wanted to clarify you didn't live full time with your mom as a child?
So what? I'm sorry if that was unclear. So from the time I was born, 1963 to 1972, I lived with both parents, but then they got divorced in 1972, and went to full custody or primary custody to my dad afterwards. So from about 9 on. Yes, which
that is a little more rare for back then.
Yes, it is, but we didn't recognize that as kids. You know, you tend to your parents say this is the way it is, and you just kind of accept it.
It's true. Oh, sorry for the interruption. Feel free to go on.
No. I may say things that I don't realize that they're unclear, so I don't mind that at all. So my dad remarried and my mom remarried. My mom remained, did not have any more children. But then my dad did have two more children who I thought were my half siblings that were born in 74 and 76. But then he developed leukemia in 1980 and passed away. Well, it developed probably in 79, but he wound up succumbing to it in 1980. And I have to say, he did drink a lot. He smoked cigarettes. He sometimes was angry, but in general, he loved me unconditionally. And he was really I considered him my best friend. We did a lot of things together, a lot of fishing, some hunting. We used to build models together. And he acted absolutely, I had no question in my mind that he was my dad. And then after he passed, I didn't get along so well with my stepmom, although I tried to stay with her for a few weeks after my father had passed. Wound up rather unceremoniously just getting in my car and driving to my mom's house in Maine and then lived there until I graduated from high school and went off to college. My sister joined me there in Maine, and the two siblings that I thought were half siblings stayed in Vermont, obviously with their biological mom. And I went off to college in 82 and then studied chemistry. I wound up becoming interested in the Marine Corps and got into a program where I went to training during the summers. And then when I graduated, got a commission and became a second lieutenant in the Marines. Went on to, I've married and divorced twice, and then also wound up going on to grad school, got a PhD from Kansas State University, but not till the early 2000s. So right around the time of 9/11. So I also, at the time of trying to defend my dissertation, I also got, shortly thereafter, got activated and went to fight in Afghanistan and came back, continued on with my life. And then part of my work, though, I became very interested in the human genome. I had friends that were working on that actual project, the human genome, and then had employees that worked for me that were using equipment that is used to sequence DNA and that sort of thing. So I had like a very peripheral interest in it. I got to hear in 2008 the actual CEO of 23andMe essentially give a pitch at a conference for 23andMe and how interesting it was. And so I thought about it at that time. I think it was 2008 or so. It was like $400 to do a sample. I thought, well, I'll just participate. I don't really have an interest other than my proof if my parents were really as Irish as they said they were. So I had no other reason to use it. I thought $400 was a little expensive and figured it'd get cheaper over time. I got divorced in 2013, and my mom was still alive and living in Florida, but her health wasn't so good. So I moved her up to my house. At that point in time, I was living in Maryland. And so in early 2015, I moved my mom and all of her belongings from Florida up to my house in Maryland. And unfortunately, she had, by that point, developed COPD. And so I guess I'm going to move now into how I learned about my status. She moved in with me and had COPD, and so her health was not good. And she wound up passing in November of 2015. And at that point, while she lived with me, I spent a lot of time with her, taking her to and from the doctors and whatnot. And she didn't mention there were essentially 3 secrets that she never shared with me, and I didn't learn till after she passed away. And so she passed away in, like I said, November of 2015. And then sometime around 2019, my brother, I assumed he was my brother, Joe, lived in Vermont still, sent me a bunch of documents and pictures and things that he had found in ostensibly our father's belongings that were in the house that he lived in. But what they contained was a birth certificate in 1959 that of a half brother of mine that my mom had, just a handful of months before she married who I thought was my dad. So she put him up for adoption. The paperwork in there showed that this little boy was put up for adoption in 1959. And I immediately called my sister about it, and we thought, well, we need to find this person and see if they would want to speak to us. And so she looked into it. He was born in New York City, but the state of New York makes it pretty hard to open sealed adoption records, and there was no record of him on the internet using his birth name on the birth certificate. So we assumed that when he was adopted, his name was changed. And around that time was when the Golden State serial killer was found using the genealogical DNA database. So I had the great idea, let's put samples into that, and then we can maybe get a chance to find David or whatever his name is now. So my sister did it first in 2019 before the pandemic started. And so she got the results back in just a little bit before the pandemic hit in 2020. And it was pretty interesting. Got reconnected to a bunch of who I thought was my dad's cousins and whatnot. The interesting thing about all of my parents, both the biological, or who I thought were biological, and the step parents, is they were all only children. So 4 grown-ups in my life were only children. So I'd never had a lot of aunts and uncles or cousins in my life. And so we just didn't know a lot about them and when they grew up. And so when my sister got her results back and we reconnected with second cousins and great aunts and uncles, it was really interesting. I got really excited. It looked like my dad's grandfather. So my great-grandfather had been the general contractor that had constructed Fenway Park in Boston in 1912, a year that they won the World Series. So that was really exciting. And so I hesitated to donate my sample, though, because we're finding a lot of connections to my dad's family, but almost none to my mother's family, and therefore not to the half brother that we're looking for. So I didn't think like I was going to help, because I thought my sister was my full sister. And then the pandemic hit. There was a little bit of lull in my schedule, so I finally submitted the sample. And of course, it was delayed because of the pandemic. It took them a while. So it wasn't until almost the very end of 2020 before I got the results. And again, I waited a day or two before I even opened them. And then I did. And immediately I looked at the more of the ethnic history. And I had a bunch of things that were Scottish and English and not 100% Irish, where my sisters had been like 99% Irish. And then I looked at the close relations, and it showed my sister as a half sister. And as many people have relayed in this podcast, that when you read that at first, it's like almost an out-of-body experience. Like, what? How can that be? What does that mean? I don't know. This is happening to somebody else. All those thoughts run through your head. So I call her up, and we are both on the logged into our accounts and looking at it. And the two siblings that are her half siblings that I thought were my half siblings, I'm not showing any connection to at all, but hers does. And we were just like, what does this mean? My mom had passed by then. The man I thought was my dad had passed by then. My stepmom, my stepdad, they had all passed. So we didn't know who to talk to about, who would know anything about this. There were no other grownups that we knew that were still alive that we could talk to about this. But then I noticed on my connections was a first cousin, which, like I'd said, I never had any first cousins growing up that I knew of. So I wrote to her right away, and her response, luckily, she responded quite quickly. I didn't put a lot of details. I just said, I'm trying to figure out how we're connected. But she was like, I know all my first cousins, and I don't recall any first cousins with the last name Doyle. So I don't know what this means. And so then I quickly gave her a little more detail about where we lived when I was born and where my parents worked. And then she answered very quickly and said, you need to talk to this other first cousin of hers. He was born in the same area, and he and his family lived in the exact same town in Maine during those years that you were born. So she gave me she said, let me make sure he's okay with speaking to you, and then I'll give you his information. And so I was able he agreed, and we spoke, and it turns out his father was essentially the librarian at the hospital that my mom worked at there in Maine, Pineland. So that we realized there was a very good chance that they knew each other. And then it turns out that they went to the same high school in Massachusetts outside of Boston, but at different years. He was about 9 years older than her, but so we're not exactly sure. Maybe they had met at that point, or that was a point, something that they started their conversation when they worked together at Pineland. We don't know, because unfortunately, his dad, my biological father, had passed away in 1972. He had been a World War II veteran, had been exposed to a lot of things during the war, and also had become after the war a heavy drinker and had always been a heavy smoker. So he passed away. He was only 46. So no chance to meet him, but I was able to meet two of my five half siblings from my biological father's side of the family. So two of them, I'm the youngest of those five siblings, but I met the two older ones. I've met them twice, and they've been extremely friendly, gracious, want to share information. I've been very lucky in that regard compared to many of the folks that I've listened to their stories. The brother lives in Texas, but he visits Maine quite a bit. The other four siblings all live in Maine full-time. The younger three, for various reasons, mostly medical, and the one brother may have an MPE issue of his own to deal with. We're not sure, but they haven't been as interested in communicating with me. But the two older ones have, and we exchange Christmas cards now. And we, like I said, we've met in person twice, which has been great. Once you have that revelation that, of the science that shows that you're not who you thought you were. I was 57 when I learned it. And it was like, the way I described it was untethered from reality. I mean, I just question every moment of my life up until that point. But one that came through like crystal clear. In those documents that my brother had sent were some high school photos of who we thought were our dads, so my birth certificate dad. And I remember it was only maybe a year or so before the DNA revelation, but I remember I had that photo up in my bedroom, and as I was falling asleep one night, I remember going, boy, I didn't look anything like him when I was 18. And then as I went through and looked at pictures when I was in my 40s, which he was in his 40s when he passed, I didn't look like him then either. And then I fell asleep. Like my brain never quite made the leap. Like, why is that? I looked enough like him as a kid that no one asked anything. But then as I went through puberty, I grew up to be 6'1", and my sister remained about under 5'6", and my mom was under 5'6", and my dad was like my birth certificate dad was like 5'10". And here I am, 6 feet tall, 6'1". But I had blue eyes and looked Irish enough that it never really was an issue. But then come to find out when I saw pictures of my biological dad, he was right around 6 foot tall. We have like the same hairline. When I look at pictures of us at the same age, before and after puberty, there's so much similarity. It's breathtaking. So that's just something that I noticed lots of people touch on. As far as my life since the revelation, like when I mentioned that feeling of being untethered, some things that helped me like get past that. I don't want to say that it's completely gone, but helped me to understand it and to not feel as lost. Where, as many people have mentioned, Dani Shapiro's Inheritance book, and then her podcast, I've listened to quite a bit before I found yours, Lily, and the NPE stories, which I've listened to up to episode 133 from start to finish. I haven't fast forwarded through any of it. That's helped me realize that I'm not alone. Although sometimes I'm sure others have had the feeling you think that this is like this massive secret that is huge and that everybody knows about it. And then as I start to tell my friends and acquaintances about what I've learned, you realize that we're still a fairly small minority of the whole population of the world. But it's still significant that this technology has come and kind of uncovered a part of society that had been essentially hidden for so many years. But one thing from your podcast that was really important to me is episode 77 with Dawn's story. She's a writer, and she had mentioned during the podcast that she wanted to help people write their NPE story. So I reached out to her. We exchanged a few emails, and then she finally did offer a seminar on writing. And I thought it would be NPE focused, but she expanded a little bit to be writing about your family. And so I recently participated in that. It was I can't remember now if it's 4 or 6 week workshop where once a week I had a Zoom call and some writing exercises and some reading assignments and that sort of thing. And it was really amazing. It turned out, if I understood, there were about 16 people besides Dawn in the workshop. I believe Dawn and I were the only NPEs, or the only ones that shared that we were NPEs. The others had other family trauma that they were trying to write about and work through and heal from. But it was just an amazing experience. And that only finished up with that a few weeks ago. And that was really important to me. And I'm glad that without your podcast, I never would have made that connection to her and that experience. So I just want to say thank you again for that.
I'm so glad you reached out to Dawn. And that is one of the best things about this podcast is if you feel inspired, feel free to reach out to other NPEs and to other people in the community. And then you can find things about other podcasts and writing seminars and books to read. So I'm glad that you connected with her. I did have a question about your half-brother that was put up for adoption. Did you ever find out any information about your half-brother?
The short answer is no. My sister, who's now my half-sister, has gotten to the point where she has a form. She just needs to have it notarized, and it will unseal, as long as it meets all of their requirements, unseal the records of his adoption. And then hopefully from there, we'll find a way to contact him if he's still alive, and hopefully he will want to speak with us.
Oh, I understand. That's disappointing and how confusing. It sounds like you have... It sounds like your mother had a child with one man, then a child, you, with your bio dad, and then your sister with your birth certificate father, and now you found 5 other siblings, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So, yeah, and the to be clear, she was married to my birth certificate father, and had been for a couple of years before I was conceived. So, there are a number of possibilities my sister and I have talked through that it was a one-time thing, and then she remained, in the marriage and convinced herself that my birth certificate father was in fact my biological father. Another option could be that there was a ongoing relationship between the two of them outside of the marriage, of both their marriages, but we don't have anybody who can shed any light on that. One other thing that we thought of, it could be sort of a Me Too thing, or she was drinking heavily then. My biological father was known to be quite a drinker then, that maybe it was a party and she has no memory of it happening, something like that. Not sure, and we'll never know. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the questions that, will remain open and never answered, that make this difficult, but not impossible because of the connections that I've made to my other siblings. And I remain extremely close to my now half-sibling sister, who was born 3 years after me.
And was let's see here, it would be your biological father, was he married at the time of your conception?
Yes, he was married from the time I was conceived until he passed away. So he was married to the mom of the 5, I call them new, but they're not new. They're older than me. But my 5 other half-siblings, he married her shortly. It was either right before or immediately after World War II. I believe it was after, now that I think about it. And they had their 5th child the year before I was conceived. And talking with my siblings, they said that she did go through a pretty hard postpartum depression period after her youngest was born. She had been treated for that off and on until she passed away in the, I believe it was the early 2000s. And then some conversations with my oldest brother said there were, at one point, some aunts that are no longer alive made some comment about, could be interpreted that they were hinting that they had seen me, and that there was a second. The funny thing is, the youngest sibling in that marriage was named Richard, the same as our father. And these aunts made some comment about a second little Richard running around, but the siblings were young enough, they didn't make any sense to them, and they weren't really sure what that meant, but it did stand out in their mind, 40 some years later, still as an odd comment for grownups to make back then. So it's kind of a long rambling response to your question was he married? And yes, my biological father was married when I was conceived to somebody else, as my mom was married to my birth certificate dad at the same time as well. There was the one thing I mentioned, and I don't think I elaborated. After my mom passed, I had like 3 surprises. So the first one was she had insisted that I bring this very old car of hers up to Maryland from Florida. And so I pulled it behind a U-Haul up here, and then she kept wanting me to get it inspected and put back on the road, which I never did because I didn't trust her to drive around here with her medical condition. So it just sat here for about a year. And then a friend of mine that owns a restaurant, one of her employees was having trouble with her car and didn't know what she was going to do to replace it. And I gave her my mom's car, which I cleaned out the seats in the front of the car, but I never quite got to the trunk by the time she needed it. So long story, I'm making this too long of a story, but she brought it home after I gave her the keys and transferred the title and all of that. And then she calls me up and said, there's a box in the back that you need to know about. And I was like, okay. She goes, it's somebody's remains. And I'm thinking like bones and skin and that sort of thing. And it turns out it was cremation remains of a homeless vet that my mom had gotten into, or it was one of her clients when she ran a substance abuse facility in Boston before she moved down to Florida. And so this man was homeless and nobody could find any next of kin. So she volunteered to take the remains, and then she didn't do anything with them other than put them in her trunk in like 1993. And they sat there until 2016 in the trunk of this car. So that was the first surprise. Then the second one was the one I described in more detail, where my half-brother Joe sent me all the documents from my birth certificate father's desk, and we learned about the half sibling born before the marriage. And then the third one, obviously, was the DNA revelation after that. So, each one, I thought mom had done something that there's nothing more surprising that I could ever learn about my mom, and then each one got more and more until the DNA revelation, which was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So amazing when we come across family secrets about our parents, and it's just so confusing at times to try to piece it together later after people are gone. Yes.
Yeah. But in some ways, I guess there was one other thing I wanted to touch on. There seems to be on both the Facebook groups and then in some of your episodes, and I'm not trying to say that some moms have not been very mean to their children, but the term, the narcissistic personality disorder, that's, I think, has been misapplied a few times. And yes, it may be some of the behavior is selfish, but I've been able to take a step back, and yeah, I'm upset with my mom, and I think she could have done things a little differently and not hidden this from us. But I also know that women, even today, but especially back in the 50s and 60s, to be an intelligent, determined woman was very much a challenge. And our society, as the technology is revealing, there are lots of women that became pregnant in maybe didn't share how they got that way, because our society wasn't really allowing them a way to do that in a safe way. So they learned to hide it. The societal pressures, again, this is just my opinion on it. The pressures made it so that they did do and say some things that later on turned out to hurt other people, but they were just not offered a good, safe way to deal with the situation that they were in. And so I try to not be too judgmental of my mom. I can deal with the feelings I have of some of the actions that she took with me directly, but I can see how I could interpret some of the things that she did and said as very narcissistic, but I know I have not been in her position, and so I shouldn't be overly judgmental.
I hear your point, absolutely. And yes, there is a difference between narcissistic personality disorder, which is an actual disorder described in the DSM-5, and then someone having self-centered traits.
Yes, and I feel that some folks they're trying to deal with this revelation and the trauma that it ensues, sort of equating the being narcissistic with that narcissistic personality disorder, and they're not interchangeable. They're quite different. But if you're not if you're not a mental health professional or familiar with it, it can become difficult to understand the subtle differences and to articulate them very well.
Very good point. And thank you for bringing that up, Geoff. And then also, there was different options available to women in different years, decades, generations than there are now, or options that I should say there weren't necessarily great options. And the society didn't give a lot of freedom and choice to women that they that maybe they would have now if someone were to find out they were pregnant with another man's child, one that wasn't their husband. So I know we speak with many NPEs, and some of them were born 40s, 50s, 60s, and some of them were born in the 90s. So that's a really good point to bring up, how you are trying to think of things through your mother's point of view at the time.
Yes, and once I had my revelation, I realized she'd been committed to a woman's right to choose as far back as I can remember. When she was in the state legislature, and then beyond that, and when we had her memorial service with the church that she attended down in Florida, several young women spoke at that were members of the church, and how my mom was kind of like an elder statesman for them in defining their place in the world and that sort of thing. But I could never quite put a finger on why was that so important to my mom, the right to choose. And then it became crystal clear why it was. And then as a scientist, I hold a very different perspective on it than I think my mom did. And I'm a guy, so of course it's different. As a scientist, I see it at the time of conception. The zygote is a genetically unique entity. And so personally, I do not want to participate in abortion and that sort of thing. But I also don't think it's my place to me or the government to tell women how they're supposed to make those choices. So I wish I could discuss that more with my mom today, now that I know the whole story. But I can't, but I'm not going to judge her too harshly on how she lived her life. We're all just trying to do the best that we can.
Thank you, Geoff. And I know you are welcome to have people contact you if they want to. What is the best way that people could get in touch with you?
Yes, probably by email would be best. I am on Facebook and all, but I know that can some people keep a lower profile than others. So by email would probably be the best start, and that's geoffdoyle@yahoo.com, which is spelled all one word, GeoffDoyle @yahoo.com.
Geoff, thank you so much for sharing your story today and for being so patient. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I do too. What you're doing is wonderful, and I hope you are able to continue it.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.